Hello everyone, and welcome to the first Academy session of 2022. So hopefully you've had a look at the material, and I'm going to share my screen now and give you some key points on the game we're looking at today. We'll come back to them at the end of the session once we've been through the game. There we go. So we're going to be looking at the game Carlsen Giri. So just confirm you can see my screen if that's okay. You should be able to see a funny looking picture of Magnus Carlsen. Brilliant, that's great, because I used two screens, so I just wanted to check I was sharing the correct screen. Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to be looking at this game today in the session. Alex and me watched this game live and it was very, very exciting. So it was Carlsen Giri in the World Blitz Championship 2021. So it's a very recent game. It was a Blitz game, but these players are so good that the level of chess is phenomenal. And these key points I'm going to come back to at the end of the session. Okay, so I'm going to just do a partial screen share now and bring up the game. So let's have a look. So like I say, some of you may have already had a chance to have a look at it. Some of you might have been busy, but don't worry if you haven't looked at it already, because we're going to be going through it today. So you should now be able to see, I'll just start from the beginning, you should be able to see, this was the study that was shared with everyone, but don't go on the study now, because we'll just go through it together here. Okay, so let's talk about the game. So it started off e4, e5, now 3 knight c6. I'm sure you've all seen this before, very, very common. Bishop b5. Who here plays bishop b5? Lopez. You have any Rai Lopez players here? Let me know. I'm a big fan of bishop c4, but I am interested if any of you do it. Gonzalo, do you still play c4? The English. Okay, great. So let's get into the game. So all of this is absolutely fine, and it's been played thousands of times before. A high-level chess, remember, white in this game is Magnus Carlsen, the world champion. A high-level chess, bishop g5 hasn't been played before. And the reason for that is probably just that it's not a very good move. It's fine once black has committed to castling, because then you know where your targets are. But Giri was very clever in this game, and when he saw bishop g5, he decided that he was probably going to go on the queen side, and it really did introduce a big battle. So let's just get everyone thinking here. I'm going to flip the board around so that we're looking from Giri's perspective, because Giri did win this game. What would you play here if you're black? Send some suggestions through. You can do the suggestions to everyone if you want, or you can do them privately. So if you were black and your opponent played bishop g5, what would you be thinking? So I'll just do them on the screen. So we've had h6 suggested, we've had queen e7, and then Carlsen queen side. Yeah, both of them look good. Queen d6 as well. Just thinking about what I think of that move. Yeah, I'll just break the pin, although I really want to attack white on the king side, so that might be a slightly awkward place for the queen, but maybe not, maybe not. We'll move the knight out of the way. Bishop e7 as well as a suggestion. Really don't want to move that bishop again, because I've already moved it once in the opening. Sometimes it's necessary because the pin could be very strong, but I don't think I want to play that move because I've already moved the bishop to c5. f5, I think that's a typo. Try and type that again if possible, because that is not quite legal. Okay, so at this point, Giri was thinking, well, actually, I'm going to attack on the king side. So h6 was played in the game. Queen e7 could well lead to the same thing, because the idea is to castle queen side and then play h6. So after h6, white retreated the bishop to h4, and now the queen went to e7. I think that's probably more precise than putting the queen on d6, because at some point this pin will be broken and then the queen might want to stay on this line. So queen e7. And I'll be honest here, I've had some games like this. I remember a very annoying game against Jack Rodder in the British Championships where his attack just worked first. And this is what happened in this game. Giri's attack just was a lot easier, as we'll see in a moment. So Carlsen went knight bd2, black castled. And if you're black, I mean, it's quite easy to attack, isn't it? Like g5, h5, and it kind of takes care of itself. So I'm just going to let Jaden into the meeting. So bishop g3 was played, knight d7, just getting the knight out of the way, defending the pawn and preparing to attack. c3, and now Giri played a sensible move. You might not necessarily need to play this, but he put the king on b8 just to make sure that his position was safe. And I don't know if any of you had experience of opposite side castling in games, because it is really a race now, and it's whoever's attack works first will probably win the game. And if you haven't seen this position before, which you may not have, doesn't it just look a lot easier to attack with black? You've got some threats coming up. I'm just looking at the chat. So there's some very sort of straightforward attacking moves that black can play. And whilst white can do the same, it doesn't seem that black's got any weaknesses. It's not that easy to create an open file. So already black's position looks easier to play. So b4 was played, which makes sense. And black put the bishop on d6. Now that bishop is quite bad at the moment on d6. But as you'll see later, that bishop becomes very, very good. So a4. And then g5 and b5. So in this position then, tell me what you'd play if you were black. Remember, you don't want to open any files towards your king. So you need to try and stop white's attack, and then you can get on with yours on the queen side. Sorry, on the king side. So what suggests a sensible move for black here? I've had some good answers through, so I'll just give you a little bit longer if you haven't seen this before. And I will let you know, this move does look a little bit silly for a reason we'll talk about in a moment. Okay, yeah, lots of people getting it right, saying c5. Now, what is the one potential bad thing about c5? Just one thing that struck me in this position. Yeah, thank you, Gregory. This bishop looks very, very silly. But as you'll see later in the game, black managed to get that bishop into the game for a very nice pawn sacrifice. So it's a temporary measure, but if you just let white do what white wants to do, for example, take here and open the b file, then white's attack will get there first. So you've got to stop that. So c5 is very necessary in this position. He's just trying to keep the queen side closed. Okay, so a5, and it doesn't, to me, this doesn't look that scary, because if I had a pawn on a6 and I had a hook that white can attack, then I'd be scared. But there's no easy targets here. Black's pawn structure around the king is good. So black carried on with h5. And now there's a threat. You can let me know what the threat is. If it was black to play, what would black be threatening? Not a difficult question, but I'll just see if everyone's awake. Yeah, we're just threatening to trap this bishop. So already white's got to make a decision here. And the decision that Carlsen made here was probably not the best decision. The bishop's going to get trapped. So as far as I can see, he's only got two moves, h3 or h4. And he went with h4. I think h3, according to the analysis, was a better move. Although it's still a bit annoying, because that's going to be a hook now that black can attack when he plays g4 later on. So he did go with h4. But now black can open G file. And as soon as you can get an open file on your opponent's king in opposite side castling positions, then you're feeling very excited. So you guys can tell me, what did black play here? You need to open the lines and attack as quick as possible. Yeah, good. Take on h4, bishop takes, and then obviously we don't want to lose material, so f6. White tried desperately to attack on the queen side, so queen b3. And now we just need to increase our attack. So rook h to g8 was played. I suppose he probably could have moved the other rook as well. And there's some other moves that were candidate moves, I'd say, in this position. I'm trying to think why he might have moved the h rook. I'm not 100% sure about that. Maybe it just means that he's got threats against the d3 pawn, because he does have some ideas of getting rid of this bishop that we'll see later. Yeah, kind of suggested a move there. Is that for black now? Yeah, that comes later, and it's a very, very good move to get the bishop into the game. Actually, in the game, he used it to get the knight in, but we'll talk about that later on. So he went rook g8, grabbing the open file, preparing to double the rooks. Bishop g3. And white is desperately trying to keep the file blocked, because as soon as that file's open, there's going to be all sorts of sacrifices, maybe a rook takes g2, or, you know, bishop h3 or something like that coming up. So as soon as he keeps the position blocked, then it takes a bit longer and a bit more effort for black's attack to work. And bishop went back to e6. Now, to me, that move makes a lot of sense, because the bishop's sort of in the way on g4. Now it's attacking the queen, and the g file is a lot freer than it was before. So queen a4. And now our black played a very nice move. So have a look at this position. How can you improve your attack against white's king? I'll put the suggestions on the screen. So we've got h4, we've got f5, and queen b7. And anything else? Nothing yet. Rook g7, that makes sense. If I can remember how to do the yellow arrow. Yes, I got it right. Anything else? Nobody's found Giri's move, so I'll give you a bit more time. Yeah, I've had a suggestion of c4, which is a good move that we'll talk about later. I've had rook g6. Lots of moves here. There's so many candidate moves in this position. So what should we play? Just checking it. Oh, we've had rook takes g3. Wow. Excuse me. So I don't think it's necessary to sacrifice material. There's no point just giving away pieces yet, because after rook takes g3, surely white can just take it back, and I'm not really sure there's a good follow-up. Still looks a bit scary for white, but white's got the advantage that white's ahead on material, so there's no point doing sacrifices until they work. No, Rakai, you don't play sacrifices just for fun in proper games. You've got to be sure they work. Yeah, we've had Arian's found rook g4, which was what Giri played. I think the best move, according to the engine, is c4 here, which came later in the game. So we'll talk about that move later on, because I think it's good in all these positions. h4, I think that's a good move as well. So I guess there's lots of good candidate moves. When white takes either with the knight or the bishop, then we need to bring some more pieces into the attack, so maybe then we play c4. So I don't think that's a I think that's a good move, actually. Queen G7. I don't yet know where I want the queen, so I don't really like that move. I think the queen was doing a good job on E7, and maybe here white can do something like knight C4, and I'm not sure what our next move is. So I'm not a big fan of queen G7. F5, just trying to bring another pawn into the attack. What do I think about that? I mean, I've got to consider bishop H4. I'm not sure whether it's that good because queen G7, but then we might be able to blockade or something. Yeah, I think that's an interesting move, F5. I'm just trying to bring more pieces into the attack. So, like I say, I think the engine top move here is C4, but the move played by Giri, which I think is very clever, is rook G4. And what that does is it prepares to double the rooks. It also adds some further support to the move H4, which is going to be coming at some point. So if you've got any questions about any of these moves, then please do ask. Because, you know, I know this was only a blitz game, but these players are incredibly good players. So the level of the chess is super high. And it's really important to try and understand their thinking. Also quite like rook G4 because it sort of x-rays the white queen. Then it might make F5 more attractive as well because of the pin. Yeah, please do ask questions if you have any. Rook G4, knight H2, desperately trying to stop black's attack, and the rook just dropped back. And then again, just trying to bring his minor pieces to defend the king. Although I'm always happy if it's an attack on either side of the board and my opponent's putting pieces to defend, because, you know, it would be more scary if white was pushing pawns at my king and bringing pieces to my king. But at the moment, white's only got 2 pieces attacking my king. There's no open files, and these pawns are not ready to create any open files at this point. So I think black is already doing very well. So just brought the other rook into the game. It's good to use all your pieces and not rush. And then knight H4 was played. So I don't think white's going to get checkmated anytime soon, but it just looks like black's doing extremely well. White's attack is non-existent, and black's got a lovely half open file towards white's king. White's pieces are on silly squares, and black's bishops are ready to get into the game. So black to play. Now, I have mentioned this move quite a lot, but this is a very important move. So black to play, and we really need to understand this move. So you can shout out what you think white plays here, and if you can, write why you play this move, what the idea might be behind it. So the suggestions I've had so far are rook takes G3, bishop G4, C4, queen F7, yeah, good answer, Jacob. I like it when people write explanations if you can. I've had knight F8 as well. I've run out of colours of arrows, so we'll have to repeat the colours. I'll just give you another minute to look at the position. F5 as well. Sorry, I'm covering the board in colours. I don't know which colour to do that. I'll do that in yellow. f5 to put pressure on the knight and to open up the queen. Yeah, I guess that makes some sense because you'd be threatening f4 next and traps the bishop and the knight's in trouble. The only thing after f5 is, can white just take it? It's a bit complicated, but this wasn't what was played, but maybe just take it. Maybe that stops your attack, so it's probably not so good. I'll just go through the other moves before we talk about the move that was played. So queen f7, I don't think there's a problem with that move, but it's not really improving the queen because we can't get to g6. Now you're trying to get rid of the bad bishop. Okay, nice idea, Aditya. We'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. There's actually a much better way of getting rid of the bad bishop. Rook takes g3. I think that's too premature. I mean, I think it's probably a good move, but there's no point rushing that because the bishop is not going anywhere. So I'd wait till the right moment to play that. I'm not saying it's a bad move though. Bishop h3. I think the pawn would just take it. I think. So yeah, we've talked about f5, so I'll get rid of that one. Knight f8. I like your idea of trying to get the knight into the attack, but as you'll see in a moment, there's a much better way of getting the knight into the attack. We talked about queen f7, bishop g4. Well, okay, it might restrict the white knights, but bishops actually come back to help clear the g file. So I don't really want to block the g file again. So I'm going to keep the bishop on e6 where it's pretty well placed. I mean, when I look at this position, I think black's got a great position, but this bishop is absolutely terrible. That might as well be a pawn. So c4 is the best move. Now, when it was played, I was watching this game live, I just assumed he was going to play bishop c5 next. But actually, what happens now is he's got such a big decision because knight c5 is equally attractive. And at this point, he decided to put the knight there and not the bishop. Now, you'll see later that this bishop becomes an amazing piece. And at least you've opened up the lines for the bishop. So he doesn't actually play bishop c5. He moved the knight to c5, which is extremely attractive, attacking the queen, attacking the pawn, and improving the knight that wasn't really doing anything on d7. And yeah, that's right, Gonzalo. The double pawns that white's got here are just very bad. So yeah, and according to the chess engine, that was the best move in this position. I just assumed he was doing it to play bishop c5, and I don't think bishop c5 is a bad move. Do you want to tell me what that's threatening? I think it's a very good move as well. What's the obvious threat here? Yeah, thank you. We can now take the bishop because it would no longer be defended, and the bishop that was stuck on d6 behind a pawn is now very happy, and it doesn't matter that we sacrificed a pawn because, as Gonzalo said, these pawns are terrible. So if you're ever trying to improve your position, you know, always look for your worst placed piece, and that's this bishop. And whilst he doesn't immediately move his bishop to c5, that would have been a very good move, and I think that was about -2 on the engine if you go bishop c5 here. So it would be a good move, but Anish found knight c5, and the queen went back, and now he did reroute his queen to f7. So well done if you saw that idea before. And as you can see, black's not breaking through on the king side right now, but he's just trying to improve his pieces. And this really shows how the strong players, they're patient. They're not trying to force the issue and rush it. They just take their time. So b6 was played. I think Carlsen had had enough here, and he thought, well, if I don't do b6, then I'm just going to lose because my pieces are so bad. I mean, he did lose, but at least he's trying to open up some lines. So black took this way, and after pawn takes, just went a6 just to block everything up. Hopefully you can all understand that black is significantly better here, because it's very easy for black to get an attack on the king and improve his pieces, whereas for white, there's no obvious plan. He's just kind of having to react to what white does. So rook fd1, bishop drop back to e7. and rook d5. And Carlsen thought that the only chance he's got is sacrificing some material, otherwise everything's going to fall apart. So this was the best practical try. Bishop takes, a pawn takes, and the only thing that white's gained from that is the f5 square, because the white square bishop is no longer around to protect it. Now remember this bishop that a few moves ago was absolutely terrible on d6 with a pawn on c5. Now Black's next move I think is very, very good. So he moved his bishop back to d8 to attack b6, and I don't think he's that bothered about trying to win that pawn, but what he's more bothered about is getting it on this really, really nice diagonal. So knight f5 and rook g6, and white is trying to get pieces back into the game, so knight f3. Okay, lots of good moves here for black. Do you want to say what you would play in this position? Send me through some suggestions, please. We've had bishop takes b6, we've had queen d7, rook g4. Probably wouldn't go rook g4 because I've just moved the rook to g6, so I probably don't want to move that rook again, so I'll take that one off unless I'm missing something. Yeah, h4. Wow. I think maybe that's not so good now because white's got two knights defending h4, so maybe white would just take it with maybe the f3 knight. I mean, I think I would play bishop takes b6. It wasn't what Anish played, but to me that makes a lot of sense. Take a pawn, and I've got all sorts of threats against g3. I've improved my bishop, and I think that's what I would play. And lots of people have suggested that. Anish did go queen d7, which is the best move. Anish is obviously extremely good player, and he's just sorting out the positioning of the queen at this point in the game. So because it wasn't really doing anything on f7, so it's moved back. So knight went to h4, rook g4 played now because the rook's attacked, and he's giving white knight h6, but he wasn't bothered about that because he had something planned. So I mean, Carlsen doesn't really have many moves, so why not take the material? Knight takes e4, so he's given back the exchange. And now this is one of those positions, so black's just taken there. So tell me what you would play if you were black, please. Yes, yeah, that's good. Yeah, suggestions, please. Because here I want you to sort of think about not just going for the first move that you see. So we've got some suggestions. I'll put them on the screen. Knight, queen takes d5, knight takes g3. Rook takes g8. Bishop takes b6. I was analysing this game with Alex. I think after bishop takes b6 in this particular position, I think white had queen takes e4, and that might look not very good, but after rook takes and then knight takes f6, forking the queen and the rook, this queen cannot actually defend the rook, so the queen's got to move somewhere. I don't know where. Let's say d8, and then after knight takes rook, I know black's got a queen, but here white's actually better. It's quite incredible that the queen can't actually defend the rook to get an exchange for it. So actually even though bishop takes b6 looks attractive, it doesn't work. The queen takes knight. That's quite clever and quite deep, that. Rook takes g8. I think just queen takes e4 and white's better. So just don't forget that that rook was defending e4. Queen takes d5. What's going on there? White might be better after knight h6, because white is actually 2 material points ahead, and actually don't think white's king is that weak at this point. So if you're sacrificing, you've got to make sure that it works, otherwise things get swapped off and then you're just material down. So the only good move here, I believe, is knight takes g3. I think rook takes g3 is also okay, but it's not great. But knight takes is a good move. Obviously, it stops the queen from attacking the knight. So if white recaptures, we can take the knight on g8, and we don't have to worry about queen takes e4. So in the game, he took, and then again, I assumed that we take the knight, but he's got an intermediate move that you don't want to forget because it's a check. So can anyone see what intermediate move, or my German's bad, but what Zwischenstück he did before rook takes g8? Yeah, well done. Take here with check, the king moves, then we take the knight. So here black is 1 material point ahead, but what I'm more interested in is the fact that this king is terrible, and the king's safety is very important, and white's king is very bad. And black doesn't, black's got very easy attacking chances. Black's got an amazing bishop. Remember, this bishop a few moves ago was absolutely terrible on d6, and look how strong it is now. So like I say, if you have a game and you have a bad piece, just try and improve it, even if it costs you a pawn, because if that bishop was stuck on d6 with pawns on c4 and e5 and a knight on e7, then black would probably be worse. But he's very cleverly enabled that bishop to become extremely powerful. So this is quite easy for Anish to play now, because he's a pawn up and he's positionally winning. So rook b1 was played, and you just move the bishop out the way. c4 to defend the d5 pawn, and now the queen came into the attack. Rook b3, defending g3, e4. Now, can somebody tell me why e4 is a good move here? What's good about that move? What's black's idea? Would queen g4 be a good move? Yeah, I'm not quite sure at what point you wrote that, but probably before it was played. So yeah, well done. Tell me why e4 is a good move, please. Well done, Ishan. I mean, it is preparing to maybe play e3, which is nice because it blockades the rook, but there's another reason that move was played. Yeah, well done, Kenneth. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right if you said it disconnects the rook and would be threatening queen takes g3, but there's another reason. Can anyone else try and find the reason why e4 is a good move, please? Yeah, thanks, Aditya. And Joseph. Yeah, excellent. So the idea is to get the bishop on this diagonal. Now, what a journey that bishop's had in this game. It started off on d6. Well, it started off on f8, but from when we were talking about it, it was on d6 in a terrible position. And then it maneuvered itself around to d8 and then got to b6 on this diagonal, which is extremely strong. And now at this point, it's going to go to this diagonal as well. So these bishops are very clever, and it's very common to sacrifice pawns to improve them. So queen went to b2, and yeah, I'm sure e3 is completely winning here as well, but he played bishop d6. Now, is that a bad move because of rook takes b7? Has he just made a mistake? Let me know, please. Louis says no. Go on then, Louis, tell me why. What about rook takes b7? Yeah, that's excellent, Louis. So I know lots of people would be scared of rook takes b7 because it looks like a dangerous check. But if you just put the king on a8, then there's no follow-up. The only pieces white's got attacking is the rook and the queen. And obviously you've got to check the checks, but rook b8 runs into rook takes b8 and rook a7 runs into king takes. And then there's no follow-up check with the queen apart from maybe queen d4. But then you can probably just go to b7. Let me just show that on the board. I mean, this is a terrible move, but you've got to calculate it just in case it works. And then there's one more check, and then I think I just put my king here, and I've got one more check, and then at this point I can put it on. Well, you guys tell me where we'd put the king now. I mean, I'm sure any square is winning, but what's the safest way to stop white from checking you? Actually, there's two that are just as safe. I think any square is actually probably good, but I was thinking a8, but then some of you, like Kenneth, said c8. It just means that it's out the way of any checks, but also, yeah, probably a silly question because any of them, I guess I was just saying don't bother going to a7 because of queen d4. So, and that's not too difficult to calculate from this position, so you shouldn't be worried about rook takes b7. And obviously he wasn't in the game. And he put his king on a8, and then he went rook b3 to defend g3. So what would you play now? Final move before white resigned. And again, I'm sure there's lots of really strong moves here, but tell me what you would play. I'm interested. Probably any move would win here. So we've got, whoa, not that one though. We've got one queen takes g3. I wouldn't go with that one. I won't try and be too clever. I won't even bother calculating whether it's any good because the rook can just take it. I don't want to enter that, but queen takes h4 has been a suggestion. Bishop takes g3. I think they're the clearest ways to win. So yeah, well done. So yeah, I mean, I think he played bishop takes g3 and then Magnus resigned. Sorry. So I thought that game was really, really instructive. And Giri was very good at keeping control. Carlsen had just lost a game in this tournament, so he was trying to provoke Giri when he went for that opening choice that we talked about. Where is it? Hang on a second. Yeah, so when he went bishop to g4, sorry, bishop to g5 here, when white went bishop g5, that's not a move that's played at high level. It's absolutely fine and respects it if black's already castled, but it gives black the opportunity to go on the queen side, and I think it's a lot easier for black to attack, especially since the bishop is so stuck when it gets to g3. So let me just bring up what I had open at the beginning of this class. Let me just make it a little bit bigger, and we can just go through the key points from the game. And if anyone's got any questions, please do ask them. So the delay in castling with queen e7, that's a very common idea in these positions. I've had it, as I said earlier, in a bishop's opening, where if I move my pawn to h3 or h6 too early before they've castled, then that can be a target and my opponent might go queenside. And I had a bad game against Jack Rudd in the British Championships many years ago, and then I learned that I've got to wait until they've castled before playing a move like that, because it acts as a hook and it makes your opponent's attack a lot easier. So it's quite interesting to look at these opposite side castling games. Your calculation has to be very good to be able to navigate them. The game also demonstrates fighting for open files and diagonals, as we saw. And I think that move c4 was very, very good. And I think it was a good move in a few instances in that game. So some of you suggested it a bit earlier, and I think it was still very good then. Giri just picked the right moment for him. And not being afraid of ghosts. So that's what we were talking about at the end there, where we weren't worried about losing the pawn around the king, because the king could just move and there was nothing there. There was no follow-up, so we just got on with our attack. I'm just looking at the chat now.